Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Are you enjoying summer?
Oh, gosh. I needed summer.
Yeah.
Summer's one of those things that, like, I feel like as a teacher, we're always working towards.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like that whale, you know?
It's like you earn your mental health reset by getting through the year.
Yeah. It really is.
I'm not sure that it's particularly healthy to have a profession where you have to, like, have a mental health reset once a cycle, but the teaching profession.
Oh, I think our brains were meant to deplete themselves and then
really?
start fresh.
Really? So we're supposed to run ourselves into the ground and then...
Here's the problem. I think if teachers figure out that that's not how it's supposed to be, we're going to have even fewer teachers.
True.
So let's not tell them.
True. Okay, it's a secret. Pretend like we didn't say that.
Okay, so speaking of all of the good things in the world, why don't you start us with our roundup?
Our headline roundup?
Yeah, before we jump right into it.
Okay, so our education headline roundup this week is just two stories because they're two big stories and they both happened on the same day last week, which was Friday, June 30th. So on Friday, the Supreme Court issued a long-anticipated ruling on President Biden's student debt relief proposal, which we talked about in our episode on...
We were anticipating.
We were anticipating
we knew it was coming, yeah.
Well, we talked about it as if it were gonna happen, but as things go, it was challenged in a 6-3 ruling. The court's conservative majority struck down the plan, which would have leveraged the 20-year-old Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, which was passed in the wake of 9/11 attacks. But it would have been able to forgive up to $20,000 in federal student loans for eligible borrowers. The HEROES Act, which became permanent in 2007, provides that the Secretary of Education may waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to student financial assistance programs in times of war or national emergency. And then, of course, COVID-19 was a national emergency at play here. So in the majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, quote, "We hold today that the Act allows the Secretary to waive or modify existing statutory or regulatory provisions applicable to financial assistance programs under the Education Act, not to rewrite that statute from the ground up." Okay. End quote. Which
feels like...
I always forget to say end quote because I just started thinking about the thing. But anyway.
We're not speaking for Justice Roberts
I'm not speaking for Justice Roberts. So... you and I have been talking about this a lot because we had been expecting this other shoe to drop. People are challenging Biden's executive power here. And when you and I were having conversations about this, I was a little confused about this too, because I'm like, we don't want to give too much power to the executive branch. We don't want presidents to legislate by executive order in general, because... yeah, the hope as is history would have it, we have a tendency to elect leaders who maybe we don't want to give that power to, let's just say.
And the hope is always that Congress can work together.
Yes, you hope you have a functional Congress because we want to be represented in the laws that are written
about us and for us.
Yes, about us and for us. And so you want to hope that laws are written by the legislative branch. But I went and read the HEROES Act.
Which is what laid... the groundwork for
right.
this.
So that's what basically the Biden administration's case hinged on, the HEROES Act, and a plain text reading of the HEROES Act. So basically this came down to, like Roberts was talking about, this idea that they were rewriting the statute from the ground up, which it seems like a very fine line to me between saying you want to modify it and you want to rewrite it. Like they have the power to modify it. Modify or waive. Right. Existing statutory or regulatory provisions. And I guess
those are two pretty broad, like as an English teacher, I'm sitting here thinking of all the ways that those two words can be interpreted.
Right. Well, that's actually part of the reason that the relief plan fell apart, is because the court ended up saying that what you can do under this act was broad in a way that the language didn't allow for loans to be forgiven. That was one thing. Gotcha. And the other thing was just that this Roberts argument that you can change it, but you can't rewrite it from the ground up. And I say that I think there's a very fine line between, okay, how much can you modify and not modify before it becomes rewriting from the ground up? That seems a pretty subjective. The ship of Theseus? Yeah, I mean, we have a ship of Theseus issue here. But anyway, I gotta say that, like, just looking at it from a very bland, like, read the text thing, I don't see how this case was lost. I really don't. Like, just a reading of the text, I was like, if I just had this is the only context I had, was the text of the HEROES Act.
Which is kind of the point.
And Biden's plan. I don't see how we got the ruling that we got. But,
and the hope is that that's how the justices read it as well.
Well, that's the thing, is that I don't have, decades of jurisprudence behind me to help me read this in an informed way, and so whatever. But it just, when you just look at it just from 10,000 feet up as a layperson to these matters, I'm a little confused by the ruling. And I was actually kind of, like I said, I was surprised because I was expecting it to fall apart. I was expecting Biden's plan not to be able to get through this challenge because of this sort of legislate by executive order thing.
Okay, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, what's our next one?
Well, the other one, the Supreme Court seems to be on a bit
these people again.
Not these 9 people.
I want a new 9 foot. Never mind.
So they seem to be on a bit of a hot streak. They effectively ended affirmative action in college admissions. They ruled in a pair of cases involving Harvard and the University of North Carolina that race can no longer play a factor in admissions decisions. This case was brought by an organization that calls itself Students for Fair Admissions.
To the point. We love
but it's kind of a misleading name. It was founded by this guy named Edward Blum, a neoconservative legal activist known for challenging race-conscious admissions policies at selective universities. That's kind of his raison d'etre. Okay. In 6-3 and 6-2 rulings against UNC and Harvard, respectively, the court was contemplating Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. And John Roberts, again, writing, quote,
This guy again.
This guy I'm a little tired of hearing from. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Okay, quote, many universities have for too long wrongly concluded that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. And then he also said, Harvard's admissions process rests on the pernicious stereotype that a black student can usually bring something that a white person cannot offer, end quote.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the deal.
What a bad week.
They're trying to go for this color blindness thing, right? Because they're saying that by taking into account a student's race in any way, it's actually discriminating. So it's basically, this whole case seems very much like let's take our idea of reverse racism all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's basically what happened. And the Supreme Court sided with the people who think that reverse racism is a thing. So
because they don't deserve something.
Well, a couple of personal notes here, just really quickly. Like, colorblindness does not work as a thought. Like, you cannot have a set of laws that is colorblind when racism is endemic and like deeply embedded in legal precedent in a society, which is the case in the United States. So no matter how you cut it, the idea of colorblindness becoming law is a problem. And then the other thing was just that this comment that he made, I really don't think universities think that the touchstone of an individual's identity is the color of their skin. And I also think that, like, this thought that black students can bring something that a white person can't, like they can, right?
Yeah, they do.
Like,
they do all the time.
You can bring a lived experience of systemic racism. That is a thing that black students can bring that white students
Which is important for white students to be around and learn.
It's important for a lot of reasons to include.
I was just going off the top of,
Yeah,
anyways.
well, that's the thing. It sounds like what they're doing is to try to basically, like, if we ignore the problem, then it doesn't exist. I mean,
but they're fine with athletes being in.
Well, they're fine with legacy admissions,
They're fine
too,
with legacy admissions.
Right.
And they're fine with the rate of admissions for athletes for Harvard. Yeah. And they're already being challenged on legacy admissions.
Right. But so all of that is fine because it doesn't have any touch point to the Civil Rights Act. Like, that's really what's at stake here, is that, okay, those things are, you can consider those things because it's not discriminatory. That's what's That's what's at issue. But the whole thing that I would just want to say here, and I know that we talk about this book a lot because we read it and it kind of got stuck in our brains, but we read The Color of Law together, which is about a history of how we have legislated racism.
It's a great book
in this country. It
has very dense.
Yeah, very, very dense. Lots of facts
data,
and figures.
Yeah.
Has a lot to do with housing policy, but it touches on things that are not housing policy, but it's totally worth a read because it makes John Roberts sound like a doofus when he talks like this.
Well, I think we found that book because we were trying to learn about redlining. And so that's how we got into reading The Color of Law. But it actually ended up doing a whole lot more than just kind of the history of redlining even in communities and stuff.
His stated, the author, I forget the author of that book, but the stated purpose of that book is to argue against exactly this kind of thing that John Roberts is hinting at here. And that's the idea that like this vague sense of, well, systemic racism doesn't exist anymore and here's why.
I'll put a link to the book in the show notes for us.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess I would just say reading that book and obviously other books about the history of racism in this country, it gives you a perspective on how we have legislated discrimination and racism into our roots.
And allowed it for so long.
And because of that, this idea that colorblindness needs to exist or can exist and that it's discrimination to even talk about or consider. I don't understand. I actually don't understand how it is discrimination to simply consider somebody's race as a factor. As one factor among many. It's not the only factor. And I think that's a little bit where Robert's opinion here goes astray, is because he's acting like, he calls it like, oh, they've concluded it's the touchstone of an individual's identity rather than it's one factor among many that makes a student a particular kind of prospect to a university. I guess anyway, it's pretty disappointing.
Are the Supreme Court like taking a break yet? Are they on vacation?
I'm not sure.
Or will we have to revisit these 9 people in 2 weeks? Okay.
I will say the HEROES Act ruling, because the HEROES Act was there and pretty simple, I was just like, okay, well, this seems like a plain text issue that is being discussed. But this affirmative action thing is more, this is a case that is much more deeply about and caught up in the history of race relations in this country. And for that reason, it's a lot more complicated to untangle. But it feels like the ruling is just trying to say, well, we're past racism now, so we need to be colorblind. That's what the ruling kind of boils down to in my mind. And I guess I'm just saying it feels to me on the surface that it's predicated on a false assumption that we are like a post-racial society. So anyway,
okay,
that's that.
So that's our news roundup.
That's the news roundup. Ready to move on to what we are talking about this week?
I like the summer episodes because we can do some different things. I know Chelsea and I have talked about a show that we love called The Bear. And in the theme of The Bear, we've decided this week to talk about culinary schools and becoming a chef.
Yeah,
how to do so.
We got deep into learning about kitchens and cuisine.
This is actually an education we haven't really talked about.
We have not yet.
And we both know people that have gone into culinary schools and training and things like that. So it was really fun to kind of learn about this. And because I'm thinking as a teacher, now I've got a little bit of knowledge on something else for my kids to kind of, because I have kids who might want to be chefs someday.
The Bear is a show about a guy who ends up running his late brother's beef shop in Chicago.
Beef sandwich shop, yeah.
Yeah. He kind of takes it over unexpectedly and tries to transform it into kind of the restaurant of his dreams.
Yeah, he had been previously working at a very, very high-end restaurant that I think had at least 1 Michelin star.
I believe so, yeah.
And then he ends up coming home to Chicago and running a beef sandwich shop, which had no Michelin stars. So
that's the premise, and it's a very fun show, and we've had fun watching it. The 2nd season just came out not that long ago, and that's kind of what inspired us to go into this. So there are a couple of different paths into this sort of career. Always. Obviously, like all careers, there are more formal and less formal ways in. But why don't you just take us through different ways people end up getting into this world?
So I kind of just broke it down into like 4 different ways into the world. So the first option is going into a program during high school. So maybe something like a career and technical school. Many of those offer a culinary studies option. And even some adults take classes or licensing at something like a technology center. So that's an option that could be in your community or your school district, depending on where you go. And then for a lot of those students, they will often do like that 2-year training for their last 2 years of high school. And then following the completion of high school, then they'll go into something maybe more specific in the culinary world, or they might go on to another option. So another option, though, would be something like going to get a bachelor's degree post high school graduation in something like business or in culinary arts. And the people that I know that have gone that route usually end up attending some kind of a culinary school after the completion of a business degree or a hospitality degree or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people choose to go straight to culinary school after high school graduation. And then some people go a non-degree route, which is something just like working with experience as you come up through a business or a restaurant, or work in earning certificates and apprenticeships that sort of fit your interest.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, there are kind of like 3 different levels of restaurant and food service operations that you can get into. The first is like an entry-level career. And so this is like a line or a prep cook. You might work as like a bus person or a dishwasher or a wait staff, something like that, working in banquets. Okay. That's kind of like entry-level. But then that moves up into like technical careers, which are people with like, who have completed apprenticeships. Then maybe they have an associate's or they have advanced certification. And that might be someone like a sous chef, a cuisine chef that like works internationally, a beverage manager, someone who might own like a food truck or a restaurant designer or a commercial cook, right? There's all kinds of things. And then at the highest level, this is like someone with a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, or really specialized training and experience. Professional careers are like culinary educators, executive chefs, international chefs, nutritionists, food lawyers, food judges, cookbook authors. Chocolatiers are up there as well. I would also guess that would be where the sommeliers are, if I had to go into it.
You usually have to get like some sort of fancy certification to be a top tier sommelier. Yeah.
So that's kind of roughly how food service is broken down, but obviously there are a million ways into it and through it, based on kind of what your trajectory and what your experience has been like.
Mm-hmm.
One word that's going to come up a bunch as we dive into this is gastronomy.
Yes.
Do you know what that is? Did you know what that was before I put the definition in here?
I did.
You did.
But that's only because I love food.
You watch a lot of cooking shows. Like, that's one thing I've known to be true about you.
I just love cooking. I love cooking.
And you're a great cook.
Well, thank you.
Which is great for me. But also, you're like very into it and like in the world that I am not.
Chef's Table. So like Chef's Table, which was a show, I guess on Netflix or whatever, but it's about some of these more like high-end like Michelin star restaurant chefs and the food that they make and produce and their training and those kitchens and stuff. Kind of these world famous chefs that get a lot of attention. Yeah. It's a show about that. I'm fascinated by it because it seems like a lot of these workplaces are crazy toxic in one way, but the food is beautiful and it's very interesting. But yes, I'm familiar with the concept of gastronomy, but what is it? So this is a word that kept coming up and I was like, well, I don't know if everyone who's listening to an education podcast will know this word. True.
So gastronomy is the study of the relationship between food and culture, and it's the art of preparing and serving richer, delicate, and appetizing food, and then also the cooking styles of particular regions and the science of good eating. So how I broke this down, other than kind of covering the different ways you can go into this world of food, is focusing on a couple of pretty well-known culinary schools.
Yes. And
how they work and what they do. So in America, here in America, one of the most famous culinary schools is called the CIA. And it's the Culinary Institute of America.
Not to be confused with the people who spy on you.
Right. But they will call it the CIA. So I will call it the CIA. Okay. And it's located in Hyde Park, New York. So what would become the CIA as we know it today started in 1946. And it was because there was a Connecticut-based attorney, Frances Roth. She never worked in a restaurant, but she was one of the most influential pioneers in culinary education.
Okay.
She was determined to establish a school that would become, quote, the culinary center of the nation, end quote. And so she had a co-founder, Catherine Angel, who was married to then Yale president, James Roland Angel. And the two of them kind of turned their passion into what would become the school. On May 22nd, 1946, the New Haven Restaurant Institute opened its doors in downtown New Haven, Connecticut, as the first and only school of its kind in the United States. It was specifically created to train returning World War II veterans in the culinary arts, and the institute enrolled 50 students and employed a faculty consisting of a chef, a baker, and a dietitian.
This is interesting.
Isn't that so cool?
Yeah,
I love that.
This was an interesting period in education in the United States. The passage of the GI Bill made it possible for all of these veterans to go and pursue educations following World War II in interesting ways. And this might have come out of some of the interest of that.
I also love the idea of, at a time when the world is in shambles, truly, following 2 world wars, and at a time when we didn't understand all that we do now about mental health concerns, I love the idea of veterans getting a chance to do this kind of work. Because I know for you and for my mom, cooking is like a happy place that they go to. It fulfills something in some people. So I kind of like the idea that maybe this kind of helped them heal and give them something that, you know, whatever. I'm getting a little like romantic about it, but I just like the idea that it was a way to help people who oftentimes have a hard time finding a return into the world.
Reintegrating
a way into it. Yeah. Okay, so after its opening, it just kept growing and growing and growing. In 1970, they started searching for a larger site, and they would be leaving Connecticut. They searched for sites in Chicago, Atlanta, and even Columbia, Maryland.
Oh, we were just there.
And they ended up purchasing what is now a very famous location in Hyde Park, New York, for its campus. Today, it still sits in Hyde Park, and it has grown across the U.S. and the world to include other locations, including California, Texas, and Singapore.
Wow.
So if you're interested in attending the CIA, you have options of what you want to study and focus on. So first of all, you can earn associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and master's degrees, and then other certificates like a serve safe or something like that you would need to work in a kitchen. And then they have majors as well that you can choose to focus on. So they had culinary arts, which is like the building foundation for the rest of your studies. They had baking and pastry arts, hospitality management, food business, wine and beverage management, food studies and sustainability, and culinary science, which is like the deepest dive for the highest levels of creating. The cost depends on your level of learning, but for a bachelor's, it's around $50,000 a year, but you are eligible for scholarships, loans, and financial aid. And they have sports teams.
Oh.
They have a basketball team and a soccer team, which I think is fun.
How competitive are those teams?
And, oh gosh, wait, I need to remember. So they have a basketball team and a soccer team, and they're called the Steels. Steels. Go Steels.
Steels?
Yeah, that's their team name.
Interesting.
So a couple of their really famous graduates included Duff Goldman, and Anthony Bourdain attended the CIA.
Anne Burrell, she has a cooking show on Food Network, I think.
I'm having Chelsea look at the list because she'll know all of the chefs that I don't know. So obviously I saw Anthony Bourdain and I was like, yes.
Yeah, Anne Burrell had Food Network show. She did like Iron Chef stuff too.
Oh, cool.
Roy Choi. Oh, there are tons on here.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's got a huge list of famous,
Alex Garcia.
Lots of famous chefs that you've probably seen on Netflix and the cooking channel.
Yeah, you should go look at the list. It's a bunch of high profile chefs. So cool.
And then obviously the hope of the CIA and the goal is to help kind of launch these students and their graduates into successful careers. So they work really hard to provide consulting and leadership programs for their students and grads to find appropriate placements or learning opportunities for future employment. And they seem to be doing pretty well because there are a ton of famous chefs on there. So anyways, that's one option in the United States.
Yes.
And that's an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's, or even just a license if you wanted to. And you can just go and take courses there in the summer too if you have like another job and want to do something fun to learn. And it's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I was looking at the pictures. It is like breathtaking. The university.
We have a mutual friend who is either there right now or was just there. She goes on this pilgrimage like pretty much every summer, I think, and visits the Culinary Institute's campus. So it does look really pretty.
So that's one option.
Yeah.
To kind of launch whatever kind of career in the food service that you have an interest in. So now, will you take us across the pond?
Across the pond.
I felt like when I was doing this research, I couldn't just provide like American culinary schools because I was like, well, we're not like the home of, France has a particular
stranglehold on culinary arts. I really should have done more research as to why that is.
I can tell you a little bit more in a minute.
Tell me.
Well, I'm going to talk about Michelin stars, and France is the home of the Michelin star.
Okay, well, that might have
Who didn't read the show notes?
No, I read it. But
I'm just kidding.
Well, I will say
I'm mostly just proud of myself for having a little bit of knowledge.
That actually is a good point, though, in that the prestige in the restaurant world hinges on Michelin stars. That's probably why. But anyway, among other reasons, there's a long history of culinary arts being focused on and practiced in France. They pride themselves on cuisine, on the process of creating and displaying artful food. So anyway, yes.
This episode makes me hungry.
It does. I'm just thinking about all those like weird foam dishes. If you watch any of these like high-end Michelin starry kind of restaurant shows, there's usually foam involved in the meal somehow.
Isn't it
they
funny
turn
that's
some
like
sort of food that is not foam into foam.
Yes.
I always get freaked out by it because I'm not really sure that foam is a consistency that I want to consume. It's not. But there's usually like something that looks like the forest floor that you're served, or something that looks like something usually is on fire, something that floats above your plate.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, it's really fascinating. But yeah, so anyway, we're going to France, and we're going to talk about Le Cordon Bleu. So Le Cordon Bleu, it was founded in Paris in 1895. So this goes back farther than our culinary institutes here. But
let's play a game.
Okay.
What was America eating in 1895? So we're post Civil War.
Corn.
Okay.
If you're going to ask me what was America eating,
it's just corn.
If the question is what was America eating, the answer is usually corn of some sort.
Wrong.
Or corn syrup.
Which is why I immediately was like, take me to somewhere in Paris and tell me about that school.
Anyway.
Corn.
Usually corn.
The best answer you could
We can't drive, and if we drive more than 2 minutes in any direction, we are driving through corn here in the great state of Ohio.
Beans.
But, oh yeah, okay, beans. We could have been eating beans. Okay. But anyway, 1895, Le Cordon Bleu was founded. It's considered today the largest network of culinary and hospitality schools in the world. They have more than 35 institutes in 20 countries, and there are more than 20,000 students of more than 100 nationalities trained every year. Le Cordon Bleu offers certificates, diplomas, bachelor's, and master's degrees. And so their big program is called the Grand Diplôme. I'm pulling out my French accent.
Yeah, this is why I had Chelsea
rusty.
Read this part.
My French is pretty rusty at this point, but this is an intensive, comprehensive program in classic French culinary techniques. Foam being one of those techniques, I'm sure. Combining the Diplôme de Pâtisserie and Diplôme de Cuisine, the Grand Diplôme is considered the passport to a future in culinary arts pretty much anywhere in the world. Can get you
a lot of places.
It's a prestige, it's a prestige thing. You can focus on different kinds of opportunities in cuisine, pastry and confectionery arts, bakery, being a baker, Danish pastries and artisan breads.
I like that one.
I want to know. Oh wait, is it Danish, pastries or Danish pastries?
Okay, so that one is bakery, Danish pastries, and artisan breads all together.
Oh, okay. So basically, you're gonna bake things. Okay.
Yeah, lots of baking.
Hospitality management and gastronomy, wine and spirits, cuisines of the world, gastronomy and nutrition, culinary arts and business, cheese.
And in my show notes, I put a big smiley face beside just cheese because that's what I want to study.
Smiley face. You can specialize in cheese, tourism, conventions and events, and other opportunities. Okay, it's located in Paris, and there's a campus in London as well, but there are 35 other locations all around the world. If you are into this world of culinary prestige, you're going to be gunning for that spot at the Paris school.
That's the most competitive, yeah.
Yeah. So famous alumni that we have heard of. Okay, Julia Child. I feel like a lot of people in America who know anything about cooking know about Julia Child.
And a great movie about her.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. She kind of tries to go and upset some of the snootiness of the French.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, she's an interesting, complicated person in her own right, but the story is worth a study. And then Mary Berry.
Who's my favorite.
Your favorite is Mary Berry.
Mary Berry is my favorite because that show, what is that show
The Great
called?
British Bake Off.
That show makes no sense to me because I will never understand why they have to bake in a tent. That's like my whole qualm. I don't understand why we're forcing all of these people
have to bake in a tent
and their jumpas to bacon tints.
Yeah.
Okay. But also, the reason that I love Mary Berry so much is because my favorite teacher's name is Mary Berry.
Oh.
That was my second grade teacher, and I think I just get such good vibes from my Mary Berry and that Mary Berry, and so...
Well, that's cool.
Shout out to Mary Berry.
Mary Berry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the Mary Berries that I love.
So yes, Julia Child, Mary Berry, many other famous alums of Le Cordon Bleu. The cost can depend on your area of focus and what certificate you're pursuing, obviously. It seems to average out around 9-month programs at about 52,000 euros, which is about $60,000 right now for cuisine and pastry grand diplome. Mm-hmm. If you want to attend the wine and management program, it's 10 months and 22,500 euros.
And that was just for the Paris campus. That was the cost I could find most easily because that's their big one. So, but they did have online options for other students as well that were a little bit more affordable, but not quite the hands-on experience, obviously, that is probably needed.
And then, like most universities and colleges, Le Cordon Bleu tries to help pair students after they complete their programs with other alums or career opportunities and internships and industry partnerships and all that kind of stuff. Tries to funnel people in because, you know, it's about their own prestige as much as it is about... Yeah, they want to look good, too. So, anyway. And then I just had I put in a couple notes here about what culinary training at either of these places might look like. You'd probably start by getting some fundamental cooking skills, like knife skills, cooking methods, use of kitchen equipment. This is what I think really is a barrier to entry to a lot of people. It's like cooking. If you read a cookbook, it'll give instructions that need to be translated, basically.
You have to have like a certain level of learning to even get to the accessible. Yeah.
So like cooking, there's kind of like a wall around cooking because if you don't have the vocabulary of cooking, it can be a little bit difficult. So.
And cooking is expensive. Like having all of the things that some, you know, as I've learned.
Well, it can be. You can do it affordably, but if you want to, it's kind of like any passion or any, you know, anything that anybody that is like has an interest in anything, an art or a craft, the longer you dive into it, the more you tend to acquire specialized industry equipment or whatever it might be. So, you know, it can be expensive, but you can start simply. But anyway, so you get the fundamental skills. We get food safety, which is obviously very important for any cook.
Please,
you don't want
everyone
to spread
study that.
Foodborne illness. We know all about that. Culinary history and theory, so the origins of different cuisines, principles of cooking, world cuisines, so different ingredients, flavors, cooking techniques used around the world. I
gastronomy, if you will.
Yes, gastronomy, if you will. I wish I would have known more about other cuisines when I was younger. I wish I would have developed a more diverse palate earlier in my life.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in my early 30s, and I'm just now, like, eating mayo, you know? Like,
that's not that diverse, but yes, okay.
But I'm just saying that, like,
the diversity in Katie's culinary experience is mayonnaise.
I mean, well, also, like, my parents, like, when I was growing up, I was a pretty picky eater, and I feel like the more I've traveled has helped me.
Yeah, you have to. When you travel, you have to be.
Yeah.
Because you get stuck and you just eat.
I was in Barcelona and I was like, okay, I guess I just won't eat. Like, those were the options, right? And so, but when I was younger, I used to be a much pickier eater. And I'm like kind of proud of myself for my evolution into adulthood because I'm not that picky of an eater anymore.
Right.
There are meals I always want or like that are safe, but I feel like I'm a lot better than I used to be. Yeah. And it's not at the fault of my parents for not trying to get me to eat stuff. I just wouldn't. But I do wish that, and this is always the case, I feel like that I probably would have. There's a lot of food I was missing out on. That's my story.
Yeah. Okay. And then...
I wasn't trying to equate mayo as like my...
I know. I just think it's funny that like your big step forward is liking
I'm really
mayo.
Into mayo.
My dad especially is a very meat and potatoes kind of guy, and I'm always trying to get him to try other things. Yeah. But the thing that I've discovered with him is that he'll ask me like what, or you even ask me this too sometimes, like what on this menu will I like?
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the dishes,
I'm not.
You need somebody to tell you.
You're really good at that too. And every time you pick a meal, I'm like, it's the best meal ever. So I'm thankful to have you with me because you understand what the meals are.
Well, it's because, like I said, there's a vocabulary, and you get ingredients that you've never heard of, and you're like, will I like this?
And
will
I
think
speak
this
French.
is disgusting? Right.
That's hard.
If there's any kind of non-English ingredients on the list, that's also... So it's just like, it's just becoming familiar enough to know, oh, I usually like these ingredients. I will probably like them arranged together in this dish.
Yeah.
But until you've acquired all of that knowledge of the various parts and pieces, you're just kind of stabbing in the dark as to whether or not you'll like it. And that can be a bad culinary experience, especially if and when the dish is super expensive. So like if you're traveling and you're like, I'm going to take a risk and try something new, you usually want it to be, something that you're going to like, so you don't end up...
Yeah, that's especially true for me.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a thing that takes time to learn, and I definitely didn't always love cooking. I didn't know how to love it, but I've grown into it. So anyway, okay, back to what we might learn. Menu planning and costing, obviously very important. Create menus that are delicious and profitable, which is important if you're doing this professionally.
Turns out that's important. Yeah.
Restaurant management, so topics like hiring and managing staff, purchasing food, running a profitable restaurant. And then professionalism, so learning how to work effectively in a kitchen, communicating with your team, and dealing with customers.
Corner.
Hot behind.
Yes,
okay.
chef.
Yes, chef. All right. Do you want to tell us about Michelin stars?
Yeah.
I didn't know all. I knew a little bit of this, but not all of this, and it's kind of fun.
Well, I just knew they were important if you were a big name. So it really is from the tire company, which is maybe the worst part of the whole story.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So in 1900, there were fewer than 3,000 cars on the roads in France. And so to encourage drivers, the Michelin brothers published a guide for motorists to encourage them to travel and drive so that, well, they would need new tires eventually. And so that was kind of how it started.
Fine.
They put together a list. It was just a publishable piece that you would pick up, and it would have restaurants, places, things like that. And it was their way of trying to get people to drive their cars, to experience new things. And then they created this rating system as like, you should go, it's worth it, whatever, up to 3 stars. For many people who want to be a chef, they always have hopes of a Michelin star. And for the record, chefs do not earn the Michelin stars, the restaurants do. So if a very famous chef leaves a restaurant after it has earned a Michelin star, the Michelin star remains with the restaurant itself.
That's really interesting because it incentivizes chefs to sort of stay, I think, in a place.
Yeah.
Rather than bounce around and earn,
exactly.
rack up Michelin points.
Yeah, because it's not theirs. Now, a lot of times when restaurants do earn Michelin stars, it's because of like, at the helm is so-and-so the chef, whatever. But it's not theirs. It's the restaurants that's earned it. So this is from elitetraveler.com. In order to earn one, it's all separated by location. And there are still large areas of countries and cities that are not covered by people to actually go in and judge for Michelin stars.
When I was working in Maryland, we were working with a restaurant in DC that I believe was the first restaurant in DC to get a Michelin star.
Yeah.
So there
DC
are not very
has
many.
a few.
Yeah.
So right now, like 2 of the biggest cities in the world, New York and Tokyo, didn't even get included in Michelin star ratings until 2005 and 2007 respectively, because that's how long it took for that area to be covered by the judges, basically. In California, when you look at the list for California, like it used to be that San Francisco and LA were separate, and now they only award by California. So like there are parts of the country that are not covered at all, and there are parts of the country that only recently got covered. The first thing about getting one is that you have to be in a covered region. The inspectors that come in and do the ratings are anonymous so that they do not receive preferential treatment. And then once all restaurants being considered have been inspected, the Michelin Guide director meets with the worldwide team and they go over the ratings until a unanimous decision has been reached.
Interesting.
The most stars that a restaurant can earn is 3. Right now in the United States, there are 223 restaurants with at least 1 Michelin star and only 14 with 3 stars.
Wow.
There are 0 Michelin star restaurants in Ohio.
Again, corn.
And as will be no surprise, France has the most 3-star restaurants with 29. They have 75 restaurants with 2 stars and 526 1 stars. And so in France alone, there are 630 restaurants with at least a Michelin star.
Wow.
compared to ours. Which
Yeah, now
only
I'm
has
really hungry and I want to go to
223.
France. Is that bad?
No, we should go.
Okay.
So obviously, having a Michelin star restaurant in your city or you working at one is probably the easiest way to put your name on the map as far as being discoverable and sought after and things like that. It's a great launching point for careers, or it can be used as a measure for failed chefs who maybe never earned one at a restaurant that they were working at. Mm-hmm. What I learned about Michelin guides and stars that I thought was most interesting is that it's kind of a hush-hush thing. There isn't a rubric somewhere or, you know what I mean, anything like that. It's like these judges go out and come back and are like, this is what I experienced, and that's it.
Yeah, it can be controversial, Michelin star ratings, getting them and losing them, because it's kind of subjective.
Yeah.
That it definitely is a weird part of the culinary world, how so much hinges on these things and how tricky they can be to pin down and to keep and all this stuff. Yeah.
So in Columbus, for any like Ohio natives, we have all heard of Cameron Mitchell restaurants, and Cameron Mitchell is like considered to be some of the like best dining in Columbus and in Ohio because he has this whole string of restaurants. And I would have guessed that one of his somewhere had a Michelin star because that's about as like really fancy as we get here, other than corn, obviously. But I was kind of expecting one of the Cameron Mitchell restaurants to have at least a Michelin star, but there are none in Ohio.
Yeah, no, I mean, those restaurants make very good food. The difference, I think,
it's like a different level altogether.
It's not about making very good food. It's, well, at least in my mind, this is just my own opinion, but I don't think Michelin stars are about making very good food. I think they're about making artful food. And
the
you
restaurants
can make very good food that isn't particularly artful.
Yeah, and like the restaurants that I was reading about that have Michelin stars, we're talking like 7 and 8 course meals. We're talking like a 3-hour dining. We're talking like a wait list that's like forever long. Like people wait months and months to eat there. So when you were talking earlier about why France has kind of become a hub, I think part of it is because of these Tire brothers. But I do think that there's definitely a certain level to that, just because that's where the Michelin brothers started with their list. And now it is something that's still highly coveted, and chefs and restaurants all over the world are hoping for them, obviously. So I also thought going into this that the chef is who earned the star.
Not the restaurant.
I thought it was like this Michelin star chef was at this restaurant.
I'm not sure I'd ever thought about it, but I knew that restaurants got them, but I guess I didn't know that it was kind of independent of the...
Yeah. Which I would rather the restaurant earn them and not the chef, because that's like a reflection of an entire team, which I like, obviously. Have you eaten at a Michelin star restaurant?
I don't think I have.
You haven't? Okay.
It's so expensive.
I wondered if while you were in New York, you didn't ever find your way into
No,
one.
I ate at so many good restaurants in New York, but I don't believe any of them had a Michelin star.
Okay.
It's definitely on my bucket list, but it is prohibitively expensive, I will say, sometimes. It's hundreds and hundreds of dollars for meals.
But it's like the whole show.
It is a show.
We should get on the list for one in like DC.
I know.
And then when we get the call, we just like run.
No, the place in DC, actually, I lied. I have eaten it because I've eaten at the Dabney. The Dabney is the place in DC that I was talking about. Yes. So I guess I have eaten at a Michelin star.
How was it?
1 Michelin star, I believe. It was amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
Like top 5 for you?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you ate?
Yeah. It was a really there were like a whole huge table of us, and we kind of like passed around a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, cool.
I think it was like I don't know. It was kind of like a family style.
Oh, really?
It was at the time, but that might have just been because it was
they were
us.
feeding
Like
you.
again, I worked at a company that made their website, and they like had us. We went there as a sort of celebration for finishing that project,
cool.
and it was really, really neat. It was really cool.
Would you go back and eat there?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, that's a compliment.
Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. So I guess I have. But normally I cannot afford it. So
yeah, that's true. If it's on the company dollar, that's a little different.
It was very, very good though.
That's awesome.
Very good. And it would come out, and like I said, the dishes come out looking like art.
Yeah.
And it's pretty special.
That's neat.
So, cool.
So that's a little bit about the Michelin star and how you earn one, or 3, up to 3. And this was a fun one to research, just because, I'm not a cook. I'm fine to help. Food isn't my love language like it is yours and my mom's. So, but there are a lot of ends, it seems, into the world, which I think is cool for a culinary interest.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that wraps
I
it.
am hungry.
Ready to do the fill in the blank questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we do the last one?
Yes, please.
Okay. The College World Series for men's baseball is wrapping up and has wrapped up since then, which is a tradition of college baseball that originally started in what year? Since the World Series started, USC has won the most titles with 12, and the Texas Longhorns have made the most appearances with 38, but they've only won 6 titles. In the year that the College Baseball World Series started was 1947.
47. It's been around for a while. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
All right. And then this episode's question is quite simple. In what year did Michelin publish its first American guide?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Want to talk about what we learned this week?
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Yes,
or-
I would love for you
Okay.
to go first. Go ahead.
Unless you've been living under a rock.
It's me. Hi. I live under a
No,
rock.
you already knew this, though.
Oh, okay.
Taylor Swift is on tour.
Oh, I did know that, yes.
Has been on tour.
Kind of unavoidable.
It is.
Yeah. If you use social media, it has been unavoidable. Yes, I will say that.
She recently was in Cincinnati for 2 shows. And what I learned is that cities with like professional sports teams are having to move their games to accommodate Taylor Swift concert times. An article I read said that the Reds moved up, Cincinnati Reds, the baseball team, they moved up the start time of their June 30th game against the Padres to a 5:10 p.m. start time rather than 7:10 because of the Swift concert taking place down the street.
Because it was probably going to be too loud, I would bet.
Yeah.
It's like a noise thing?
Parking, accessibility.
Yeah.
I think some people thought that maybe they would go to the game and then the Taylor Swift show, whatever. But also, if you're unfamiliar with Cincinnati, where the Bengals play and where the Reds play are just on the street from each other. So everyone's competing for the same,
Yeah, there tend to be like stadium districts in these major cities, and they all have parking all close together. So I get that. That makes sense.
So her shows are bringing in like 80,000 people per show.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I'd live in a world where the MLB teams are moving their schedule to accommodate Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in, and I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. It kind of brings me joy.
The Swifties are powerful.
They are probably the most powerful. And I have said for a while now that if the Swifties aligned on like a social thing, it's over. Like we have no chance. And I say we, like I wouldn't be with the Swifties because let me be clear, I am. But
you are a Swiftie.
Yeah. The other part that I thought was really funny about the Reds moving it up is that game, the Reds won and they like put off fireworks at the end of it, and it was like in the middle of like a like melancholy Taylor Swift song. So in the background of like Taylor Swift, like whatever, crying on a piano,
singing, like sad
yeah,
me,
and then like in the
fireworks.
background it's like the Reds win, and it's just like fireworks.
Wow.
Anyways, so if you are going to any sort of major sporting event and it's in conjunction with a date of a Taylor Swift show, you should probably double check.
Check your parking, get in there plenty of time.
8 hours early at minimum,
For real.
and you're going to be competing against 80,000 people in glitter. So,
Good luck.
yeah, Godspeed to you. Okay, what'd you learn?
Well, I learned something that I sort of am stealing from you, basically, because you were watching Full Swing, which is it's like, what, a documentary style show?
Yeah, it's like a documentary style show that Netflix is doing about the PGA Tour.
About professional golf. And it included bits of this controversy about professional golf that has been kind of gripping the sport for the past couple of years. And that's this conflict between the PGA Tour and Live Golf, which is a Saudi-backed league that has been poaching star players from the PGA Tour for the last couple of years with these enticements of very lucrative contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So the show was kind of highlighting some of this tension and seeing what was happening to the players who were going there, kind of following the money. It's super interesting, but basically I knew nothing about this because I don't really participate.
Yeah.
I don't watch golf. I don't really care about golf.
The one thing that made Live an interest of professional players is that you got paid regardless of results. And then the PGA, you have to make the cut and then you get paid based on, whatever the placements are.
Yeah.
But when they chose to go to Live, they just got a payday. They didn't have to golf well and win.
Yeah.
Where the PGA rewards winners with more money, which feels like how sports should.
Yeah, I think that the live golf approach, it treats it more like it's sort of like the streamers that we watch.
Yeah.
Like they'll sign a streaming deal to just go on a particular platform. That's kind of what these golfers were agreeing to be in this live golf league. So again, like I don't follow golf. I don't know anything about golf. I hadn't really cared about golf previously to now, but this is a super interesting sort of international relations story that's unfolding against the backdrop of professional golf. So what I've learned from this Full Swing documentary thing is that the PGA Tour banned players that had decided to go play for live golf from participating in PGA Tour tournaments. And the reason for all of this conflict is Saudi Arabia's history of human rights abuses. Everybody on the Full Swing thing kept bringing up the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist. But there are plenty of other human rights issues and abuses also at play here. Previously, the PGA Tour had been like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not going there. If you go there, you're not playing in the PGA Tour. And then just a few, like, I guess last month, the PGA Tour blindsided everybody and announced that it would merge with Live Golf.
No one had any idea. The players, no one.
The players had been like rallying against this idea of cooperating with Live Golf and going to go play for Live Golf. And they kind of got blindsided by the leadership of the PGA Tour. There's this merger announced. It's now being investigated by various Senate committees and possibly, I think somebody called for the Justice Department to investigate it.
Yeah.
But basically the sport, everyone's been talking about like the kind of reunification of the sport after this civil war between Live Golf and the PGA Tour. And now there's going to be this potential merger. We'll see how it goes. I don't know that it doesn't sound like it's anywhere near finalized yet, but they've announced this and many players are not happy. It's quite fascinating. I did not realize how complicated all of this was and their backroom dealings and billionaires making plays and people chasing that bag and that whatever. But I didn't realize that golf could be that.
It's interesting. And
that interesting.
They were recording for the next season when all that news broke.
Yes.
So if you have an interest in that.
I'm interested for the next season to come out because of that, because I know that all of that footage is going to be a part of it. So
it's a really well done show. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I was kind of watching it on and off with you, but I started paying really close attention with all of this live golf stuff. So yeah. Anyway, that's what I learned.
Any farewell thoughts?
Just have a great summer and continue to relax if you are able. If you are a teacher.
If you are able.
Yeah. If you're a teacher who's not in school right now, hope you're enjoying your time off.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
I thought the name of her tour was Eros, like E-R-A-S, like a Greek word having to do with passion. But it's actually eras, like an era of my life that I went through, like the era, like a time period. Yeah. And I was very confused, but anyway.
Yeah, this tour is like all of her albums.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I understand that, but it took me a minute